so writers, we're going to be continuing shared writing today. And as you know, shared writing is when we share the work of thinking and imagining what we might write, but I'm going to be the one who physically writes it down. And one of the things that we're working on right now is really developing our literary essays. So before we go off and do that on our own, I thought it would be helpful if we started to continue to develop a literary essay together as a class. And so let's just review some of the main parts that we want to have in place before we start drafting a literary essay. So the first thing we want to make sure we have is that claim, right? This is where we're forming our argument and we're having a statement that says, like, here's what we are trying to prove or support in this essay. And we have one that I'll remind us of in a moment. But the thing we're going to really work on today is that the claim, the way I sometimes think about it, is it would be like putting a roof on a house. If you don't have walls of that house, there's nothing to support it, right? And the roof would not be in the air, it would be down on the ground, right? So kind of like the walls of the house are these supports. And what we're going to work on today is how we can make sure our claim is like held up and supported. And I'm going to teach you a few different ways, and we're going to work together to imagine how that could go and write it up as a group. And just because this is what's coming next, after we decide on our supports, then we'll go to the specific details or evidence from the text. But we're really going to focus on this level of support as a group today. Okay, so underneath here, I have that claim that we worked on together yesterday. And I'm going to read it so that we remember that after we read both of the texts, Stray, and we also read the story A Pet by Cynthia Rylant, this was the claim that we came up with. Sometimes love comes from unexpected places. Let's all just sit and remember that claim that we made for a moment and why we came up with that big idea that really came from both those stories, Stray and A Pet. Sometimes love comes from unexpected places, right? Remember we talked about how both the goldfish, Joshua, and the dog that was the stray, right? That both of them were providing love to those kids, even though that wasn't necessarily what either of them expected, right? So before we just leave this up here sort of floating, we want to think about the supports. Like, how are we going to support this and really form a really strong argument? So I have a few options that I want to put up here, and we're going to all think and decide as a group how we're going to do this. So one way we might choose to support our claim is by the sequence of events in the stories. So we might think about in the beginning, in the middle, and the end, right? So we might think in the beginning, how did love come from unexpected places? In the middle, and in the end. So that's one option. Let's think about another option. Another way we might do this is through thinking about the choices that the characters made, right? So what's one choice the character made that shows love coming from unexpected places? Maybe another character and how they thought about and made a choice about how love comes from unexpected places, right? So we can look at the sequence of events, character choices, and I'm going to introduce a third option for us, which is we can also look at the author's craft, which is really just, remember we know that craft are sort of the choices that an author makes, not the character, but the author. And so we might think about how did the author include descriptions that showed love coming from unexpected places? Or how did the author use figurative language? Or author's omissions, which means is there something the author left out that actually shows love coming from unexpected places? So our job today is going to be to think through each of these and pick the way we want to support our argument. We're not going to write the whole thing. We're just going to sort of think through which ones we think are going to be the strongest argument for this claim. Okay? So let's start by trying the sequence of events. Okay? So let's think about from the specifics, and let's, at first for this one, let's just think about Stray. Okay? So if we just think about the text Stray, let's think about in the beginning, how we could say love came from unexpected places in the beginning of that story, in the middle, and in the end. And when you have some idea of that, can you just put sort of a thumb up on your knee to show me and your partner that you have some sequence of events that you think could support that claim? So you're thinking about what happened in the beginning that was showing unexpected love, in the middle, and at the end. So So about half of you have your thumb up. If you can't think of all three, see if you can think of at least one or two of those. Okay. Turn to your partner and explain to them what you might say for in the beginning, in the middle, and the end. Listening partner, your job is to make sure they're connecting it back to the claim, that what they're saying connects to that. I'm going to listen to. Let's go ahead and try it out.
Dog. So basically, when she finds the dog, right, and she basically finds it on the car, and then she takes it, and she takes care of it. And then let her parent middle, the parents decide to keep the dog, the dad there. And then at the end, she like died and takes the dog back to the house and keeps it because we're having a
And what's your name?
Nicholas. Didn't do anything. Yeah, she was like happy to in the beginning. Yeah, and then the house, then at the beginning, house and like the dog like was just there sitting, and she's like, oh, I'm not scared of you coming. The dog wasn't scared of you, like she showed love to the girl.
Okay, writers, let's turn back and come back together as a group. So Nicholas, I know lots of people were sharing. Can you share what you said to your partner that we can all listen to hear one example of how this might go? Go ahead.
So basically when she finds the dog and she takes it inside to her house, and because she was like sad that it was outside and it was cold.
So she was showing that unexpected love when she first took the dog in the beginning, and then in the middle?
In the middle is when the dad decided that they'll keep it because they felt bad for it to go back outside in the cold weather.
So in the middle, when the dad decided, okay, I guess we can keep it. Mm-hmm. What about in the end?
And in the end, when the dad takes it back because he feels bad to leave it in the shelter because of how bad.
So to permanently keep. So this was like in the middle when they kept the dog just for a little bit. Mm-hmm. And they were giving it back. Mm-hmm. But then in the end, when they decided to keep the dog as their pet for good. Mm-hmm. So you might have said slightly different things, but do you see how he took the claim and he thought about three events from the beginning, middle, and end that supported that? Mm-hmm. Okay. So now we're going to try the others, and then we're going to kind of vote or decide as a group which one is the strongest. So kind of keep that in mind. Now let's look at this and think about choices, okay? Let's stick with Stray for right now, okay? So let's think of at least two characters who had to make choices in that book. If you can think of three, that's fine. You don't even need to raise your hand, just think about it right now, because we're gonna share the work together. When I call on a person, it's kind of like just one person doing the work. We're all gonna think about it, okay? 2 or 3 characters, okay? And let's think then about how each of those characters made a choice that connects back to love coming from unexpected places. So you might be thinking the choice the mom made, or the choice the dad made, or the choice the girl made. So this time when you share with your partner, and you might use some of these words if you want, like this character chose or this character chose, let's switch who goes first. So if you went first the first time, let your partner go first. And remember, the listening partner, your job is to make sure what they say connects back to that claim. Okay, let's try it out with this other way to support.
Do we all know the dad? The dad chose to get back. Yeah, and the dad was like, and the girl made the choice to like take it. Exactly. She basically, you know, she exactly but she didn't. She had.
So you're saying that one choice was when the dad, is that what you're saying? She made a sacrifice?
And the dad.
What was the sacrifice?
Because like they said that he couldn't like afford a pet, so they would have to sort of sacrifice certain luxuries of their life to have.
So that really shows some love, right? To sacrifice something yourself for someone you love, even if that someone you love is a dog. Yeah. Who else made a choice?
Because the girl, she brought the dog home.
And can you connect that to unexpected love?
Like the dog probably didn't expect the girl to like take the dog outside.
So do you think the dog made any choices?
sort of to be like not to almost frustrate the parents at all, because they were saying how the dog was so good. Like,
Yeah, because the dog was a stray dog, right? But it came in and was so well behaved, right? Yeah. Okay, writers, let's come together. So I was talking to this trio over here, and at first we were thinking about the choice that the dad made, right? The choice the dad made, and you said to sacrifice, right? And that was a sign of love, to sacrifice because they didn't have a lot of food, and it would be a sacrifice to take the pet in. And then he said also the girl made a choice to take the pet in and to love that pet, even when she knew she might not be able to keep it, right? But then we had this big aha, that the dog made a choice. Because, do you want to say what you were saying? Can you say that?
Like the dog had decided to be so well behaved in their house, like not their bathroom inside or anything like that.
Right, the dog was a stray dog. The dog could have torn the house apart and made it easy for them to say, you are not staying, right? But the dog made some choices to sort of fit in and blend in and not make a ruckus in the house, right? So we actually have more than two characters. We have a few characters' choices that we could use to support this claim. Right? So let's try the third one, and then we'll decide as a group which one it might be. Okay. So we also could think about the author's craft. So these are places where the author described something that shows the love coming from unexpected places, or used some figurative language, or left something out that you thought was going to happen. This one is probably tricky, so I'm going to say like what I'm thinking about for the author's omission is I expected the girl to throw a tantrum when the dad took the dog. I didn't expect for the author, I didn't expect for the girl to handle it the way she did, right? I also didn't expect the way it ended, right? So we can have descriptions, figurative language, or omissions. You don't have to have all three, but see as many of these as you can think of for how you might support the claim by the choices the author made. Okay, so think for a moment about that. And then we're going to do this one more turn and talk about trying out each of these. Do you have some ideas of what the author chose to do that you could use to support this claim? Okay, go ahead and turn, and again, take turns who's going first.
For the author, I agree for like that they showed that they left out that part. Would left out be like the part, like that big part, like when he went to the.
Yeah, the author did not describe that part, right?
Yeah,
we did so much.
Yeah, she didn't describe what it was like inside.
So how does that connect back to the claim?
That during the thing, when he went to the pound, that he brought the dog back. He felt love for the dog because he didn't want. It said that he wanted to die there. In that.
Yeah.
Because they like killed them with so he
Yeah. Do you remember any like language or descriptions that the author used?
When she said when he got to the pound, when he said like he wouldn't leave an ant in there, like made him feel like he should keep the dog instead of leaving it.
Yeah. What's your name?
Maya.
Maya, would you be willing to share those ideas with the class if I ask you to? Okay. Okay, so let's come back together. So Maya and her writing partners were having a conversation, but I'm going to have Maya describe. So you were focusing on the description and the omission, right? So can you share the two that you were thinking about that supports this claim?
When the dad went to the pound and he said he wouldn't leave an ant in there, that like felt like he would bring the dog home even though he didn't want it.
So that description that the author said, I wouldn't even leave an ant in that shelter, let alone the dog, was some language that you thought showed the way the dad loved the dog. And then you had this idea that you were thinking about a scene that the author chose to leave out, right? Can you say a little more about that?
When he didn't really describe what it was like in the pound, like what he smelled, saw, like what he heard.
Yeah, there was no description. Cynthia Ryland, the author, didn't describe what it was actually like when the dad went there and that whole choice or decision, right? Cynthia Ryland chose to leave that part out, right? And so those are some examples of how the author made choices that led us to this claim too. So here is the decision part. So we've tried all 3 ways to support, and now we need to just decide which one is the strongest support. Because we realized we could actually support it in any of those 3 ways. But now we have to sort of decide which one do you think we're going to have the most evidence and most clearly, remember, we don't want our claim hanging out here without any supports, right? Like has the strongest. So think for a moment, based on what you and your partner and the group talked about, which one do you think? Is it sequence of events, characters' choices, or author's craft that's going to strengthen this claim the most? Put your thumb up when you think you know which one. And be thinking about why that one. Okay. Convince your partners why that particular one. Turn to your partner. Convince them why that one. Just gonna stick around you. What do you think? The characters' choices? You both agree on that? Yeah. So what's your reasoning why? And there's multiple characters we can use to support it, right? Okay, so this is the tough part. I know we have to come to some consensus, okay? So I was listening, eavesdropping a little bit, and the people who, when I was listening, just seemed to convince me most, seemed to think that the character choices, it seemed like most of you, not everyone, but most of you thought this was going to be the way that you thought we really could support this. So I'm going to take these down, but I don't want us to forget these because when you're writing your own literary essays, these are other options that you can try to decide on your supports. So let's just kind of wrap up, think about what we did and where we're going next, okay? So, and by the way, the reason why a lot of you said character choices was because you realized you can bring in multiple different characters and you would have a lot of evidence from each of those characters if this is the one that we chose, okay? But a lot of you made claims for other ones too, but sometimes we just have to pick as a group. So let's think back again for what we did and where we're going next. So we reminded ourselves what our claim was, and we thought about different ways to support that claim, that we could think about the plot or the sequence of events, the choices that different characters make, and the author's craft of the choices the author made. And we didn't just kind of randomly pick one, we really tried to think it through and talk it through for each one and how it could support the claim. And then we picked the one that we thought we would really have the most evidence and made the strongest support. And that's where we ended up with today. Where we're going to go next is now we're going to start to list the evidence, those details from the text, and then we can map all of that out on the page so that we can begin to actually turn this into an essay. So I want you to just end by thinking a little bit about something that we did today that you think would help you when you go back to independent writing. Because we did a lot today, and when you're writing your literary essay, can you just think for a moment about something that you might be able to try that will help you strengthen your arguments? And can you give me a smile when you have that in your head of what that might be that you could try? I see some half smiles. Does that mean you have half an idea? Oh, okay, not some more. Okay, thank you, writers.